One of the very first questions organization asks when starting ISO 27001 is, what documentation do we actually need? Do we need hundreds of policies? Imagine an ISO 27001 system that does not pass audits but actively strengthens your business. In this video, I'll be breaking down how to transform your documentation from a static compliance chore into a dynamic strategic asset. Get ready to discover how to build an information security management system that genuinely drives resilience and continuous improvement far beyond anything you've ever seen. Let's start with the most important thing to understand. ISO 27001 is not a documentation-heavy standard. It doesn't care about how many policies you have. It cares about whether your information security program actually works. Documentation exists to prove three things I always outline: your understanding of your risk, appropriate controls that you have chosen, and how you are managing your security controls consistently. Let's dive into the core mandatory ISO 27001 documentation. Firstly, we must define the scope of your ISMS. This explains which part of your organization, location, systems, and information are covered by ISO 27001 and whatnot. Mind you, in defining your scope of your ISMS, you need to be able to also provide any exclusion along with clear and justifiable reasons for selecting controls that are applicable in your environment, physical site and location that you deem to be appropriate to the location of the scope, and also the data assets that needs to be protected under the scope of the ISMS. Next is your information security policy. Information security policy is the high-level statement from leadership that explains how seriously the organization takes information security. This should be able to define the organization information security goals, the commitment from management in protecting information, how you are going to align security best practices and business needs and legal obligation to the business operations. This policy usually acts as an umbrella with more detailed supporting policies underneath it. Information security policy can be written in several categories. You can have an information security policy that covers your ISO ISMS clauses 4 to 10, or can also cover the Annex A controls or any other controls from any other frameworks that you deem applicable, or additional controls that can be added to what? Your ISMS. Let's look at risk methodology, risk treatment, and then your what? Your treatment plan. ISO 27001, as I always say, it's a risk-based, so documentation here is critical. You need a risk assessment methodology. You need a risk register showing the identified risks. You need a treatment plan explaining how you are going to handle this risk, or how these risks are going to be handled. Like I always say, the risk assessment methodology can be documented in three specific criteria: identifying your security risk, how you need to assess the likelihood and impact, and then how you are also going to prioritize the risk. Similar to the assessment as well as the treatment plan, you need to select treatment options for those particular risks that you have identified, the controls and actions that you are going to put around those risks that you have also identified, and then your plan of how you are going to treat that particular risk that has been identified. As I've earlier stated, in the risk assessment, you need to document all your risks that has been identified in what we call a risk register. Let's look at the statement of applicability. The statement of applicability is one of the most important documents of ISO 27001. Most important document because it lists all Annex A controls, showing which one applies to your organization and how you explain those controls that apply to your organizations. Beyond the mandatory documents, auditors will also expect to see evidence that security is operating day to day. Hence, this brings us to the documentation you need to support operations and controls in your organizations. These operations documentations are typically supported from the Annex A controls. Examples are your asset inventory, your assets controls, incident response, backup, training and awareness record. Mind you, these don't need to be complex, but they need to reflect the reality of your organization's processes. Let's take them one by one. Competency, training and awareness record. Here we are looking at evidence confirming that personnel who are supposed to perform the functions and operations and duties in the ISMS are qualified, competent enough to perform those responsibilities. They are also aware and have understanding of relevant policies, procedures, and obligations within the organizations and the activities that they are about to perform. In simple terms, auditors want to see what these individuals have done in order to be able to perform these responsibilities. Communication records and objectives. Communication is where you are going to document everything about your information security to both your internal and your external stakeholders. What are the key things that your internal and external stakeholders are supposed to be aware of? How are they supposed to be aware of them? And then you need to be able to provide those information to both your internal and external stakeholders. Similarly applies to your objectives. The goals that you are supposed to achieve in protecting the information assets and managing the security risks within the organization. Monitoring, measurement, and improvement documentation. Here we are looking at three key things: internal audits, management reviews, and then non-conformities records. Internal audit, here we are looking at a documented internal audit schedule or plan, where you need to document the records of outcomes, observations, and findings of audit that was conducted internally for the controls that are applicable in the environment. You also need to document all the corrective actions or issues that has been identified and any follow-up activities. Once this record of audit outcomes have been documented, they need to then go to the management for reviews. Decision needs to be made and actions assigned during those reviews. Identification of required resources to support the ISMS are also undertaken by leadership. Similar to the internal audit, where you need to identify the non-conformities. Here, under the non-conformities record, you document all the non-conformities or issues that has been identified in here, and then you explain the root cause of these issues that were identified, and then also provide evidence demonstrating how these issues are going to be resolved. If they are resolved, evidence showing that they are operating effectively. Let's clear up some myths. ISO 27001 does not require a policy for every single Annex A control. Perfect documentation on day one, massive documentation nobody needs, nobody follows. ISO 27001 is all about simple, clear, and use documentation that are well engineered and also depicts the actuality of what your control and your business processes are. Remember, auditors will assess whether your documentation effectively supports the operations and improvement of your ISMS. What is the takeaway from this video? ISO 27001 documentation is about clarity and evidence, not volume. If your document clearly shows how risks are managed and controls are operating, you are on the right path. If you find this video helpful, like the video, subscribe for more practical ISO and GRC guidance, and drop a comment if you want a walkthrough of real ISO 27001 document. I will see you in the next video.